You keep waiting for the moment where you finally feel ready, clear, focused, motivated, the moment where everything just clicks, and you suddenly become the person you've been trying to be. But that moment never comes, and deep down, you already know it. You've been waiting for it for too long, telling yourself that tomorrow will be different, that next week you'll start, that soon something will change. But nothing does. Because the problem isn't your timing, it's what you're waiting for. You think you need motivation, that feeling of energy, that surge of drive, that internal push that makes everything easier. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, and most of the time, it doesn't come when you need it, so you stay stuck. Not because you're incapable, but because you're waiting for a feeling that was never meant to lead you. And while you wait, life moves. Opportunities pass. Time disappears. Days blur together, and you start noticing it. That quiet frustration, that feeling that you should be further by now, that you're capable of more, but somehow not doing it. So you try again. You watch something inspiring. You get a burst of energy. You tell yourself this time is different, and for a moment, it feels real. You start. You take action, you feel in control, but then it fades. The energy drops, the excitement disappears, and suddenly everything feels heavy again. So you stop, not because you decided to, but because the feeling left, and without it, you don't move. That's the cycle. Start, stop, repeat, and every time it happens, it reinforces something dangerous. That you can't rely on yourself, that you only act when you feel like it, that you need the right mood to do the right things, and over time, that becomes your identity. Someone who wants more but never follows through, not because you don't care, but because you've trained yourself to depend on motivation, and motivation is the weakest foundation you could build on, because it's emotional, and emotions are unstable. They shift constantly. They react to everything, your sleep, your environment, your stress, your mood. And if your actions depend on that, then your life becomes unpredictable, inconsistent, out of your control. You don't decide what you do, your feelings do, and feelings don't care about your goals. They care about comfort, ease, relief. So when something is hard, they push you away from it. When something is uncomfortable, they tell you to stop. When something requires effort, they suggest something easier. And if you listen, you stay the same. That's why waiting for motivation keeps you stuck, because it teaches you to move only when it feels good. And growth rarely feels good in the beginning. It feels slow, awkward, uncomfortable, sometimes even pointless, because results don't show up immediately. Progress is invisible at first, and without visible progress, motivation disappears. So, you quit. Again, not because it wasn't working, but because it didn't feel like it was. And that's the trap. You judge your actions based on feelings instead of direction. You stop because it feels wrong, even if it's right. And you start things that feel good, even if they lead nowhere. That's how people stay stuck for years, busy but not progressing, active but not moving forward, because they confuse movement with direction. They do what feels right in the moment instead of what matters in the long run, and slowly they drift further away from the life they actually want, until one day they realize how much time they've lost, how many chances they didn't take, how many things they started and never finished. And that realization hits hard, because it wasn't a lack of ability, it wasn't a lack of opportunity, it was a lack of consistency, a lack of doing things even when you didn't feel like it. Because that's the real difference. Not talent, not intelligence, not even motivation. Consistency, the ability to act regardless of how you feel, to show up even when it's hard, to continue even when it's boring. That's what builds anything meaningful. And that's exactly what motivation cannot give you, because motivation is temporary. But consistency is a decision, a choice you make over and over again, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when you don't feel like it. That's where control begins, not in moments of high energy, but in moments of resistance, moments where your mind tells you to stop, to delay, to avoid, to come back later, and you don't. You continue anyway, not because you're motivated, but because you decided to. That's a completely different level of control, because now your actions are not dependent on your emotions. They're independent of them. And that changes everything, because now you're stable, predictable, reliable, not to others, to yourself. You become someone who does what needs to be done, not when it feels good, but when it matters. And that builds something powerful. Trust. Not external trust, internal trust. The kind where you know you'll follow through, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you'd rather do something else. That's what creates momentum. Not bursts of energy, but repeated action. Day after day, small steps, done consistently, until they compound into something bigger, something real, something that actually moves your life forward. And once you experience that, you stop chasing motivation, because you realize you don't need it. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired. You just need to act. And the feeling follows. Not before. After. That's the part most people get wrong. They think action comes from feeling, but it's the opposite. Feeling comes from action. You start, and then you feel better. You move, and then momentum builds. You continue, and then clarity comes. But if you wait for it first, you wait forever. Because nothing creates itself. No one suddenly becomes disciplined overnight. No one magically finds motivation and keeps it forever. That's not how it works. It's built through repetition, through showing up, through doing things you don't feel like doing again and again, until it becomes normal, until effort feels natural, until action becomes your default. And at that point, you're no longer stuck, because you're no longer waiting. You're moving. And movement changes everything. It shifts your identity from someone who thinks to someone who does, from someone who waits to someone who acts. And that shift is what creates results. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently over time. And that's what most people underestimate, the power of doing something, even when it feels small, because small actions, repeated daily, become something massive. But only if you don't stop. Only if you don't wait for the perfect moment. Only if you move, even when it's not ideal. And that's the choice in front of you right now. You can keep waiting for motivation, for clarity, for the right time, or you can act without it, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels forced, even if it feels wrong at first, because that's how change begins, not with a feeling, but with a decision to stop waiting and start moving, because the longer you wait, the easier it becomes to keep waiting, and the harder it becomes to start, until one day, starting feels almost impossible, not because it is, but because you've made waiting your habit, and habits are hard to break, but not impossible, because the same way you built them, you can break them with one action, then another, until waiting is no longer your default, and action is. That's when everything shifts, not around you, but within you, and once that happens, you don't need motivation anymore, because you've become someone who moves without it.